I never imagined betrayal could cut this deep, not when it came from the very people I once called family. My name is Sarah. I am 36 years old, a military veteran who once believed discipline and loyalty were the foundation of life. For years, I carried those values like a shield protecting my marriage, my home, and the family I thought I could trust. I built my world on the conviction that love and faithfulness were sacred. But I would come to learn that even the strongest walls can be shattered, not by enemies on the battlefield, but by the ones sleeping under the same roof. When I left the service and came home for good, I thought my battles were behind me. I traded the sounds of gunfire for the quiet hum of suburban nights, the weight of my uniform for the warmth of a husband's embrace. Or so I thought. My husband Daniel was supposed to be my safe place. He was charming, intelligent, and the kind of man people instinctively trusted. We had been married for 7 years, and I believed those years were built on something unshakable. He knew the scars I carried from deployment, the nights I would wake in a cold sweat, trembling from memories I could not silence. And I thought naively maybe that my vulnerability was safe with him. But I started to notice the cracks long before the truth came crashing down. At first it was subtle. Daniel's phone always seemed to be face down, his laughter too quick. When I walked into the room, his explanations for late nights too rehearsed. I wanted so badly to believe his excuses that I convinced myself I was imagining it, that trauma had made me paranoid. I told myself, Sarah, you're just being cautious. Don't ruin a good thing with suspicion. And then came the nights when his warmth in bed turned cold, his hand pulling away when I reached for him. The loneliness that followed was unbearable, not because of the silence, but because of the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on my chest. I buried myself in routine gym sessions, part-time work therapy appointments, anything to distract from the feeling that the man I had built a life with was slipping away. The truth revealed itself in the cruelest way. One evening I came home earlier than expected. The house was too quiet, but the kind of quiet that prickled against the skin. As I walked upstairs, I heard muffled laughter, his laughter, but softer, more intimate. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then I opened the bedroom door. There they were, Daniel and my own brother-in-law, Mark's younger brother, tangled together in the sheets that still smelled of me. The shock ripped through me like a grenade going off in slow motion. Daniel's eyes widened with terror, but not guilt. And my brother-in-law, he smirked as if daring me to crumble. In that moment, something inside me died. Not the woman, not the wife, but the soldier. The soldier who had fought battles overseas suddenly realized the real war had always been at home. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice came out eerily calm as I told them both to get out. They tried to speak excuses, fumbling out of their mouths, but I couldn't hear them. My ears roared with the sound of betrayal. I stood there, hands trembling but spine unbroken, and repeated the order like a command on the field. Get out. When the door slammed behind them, I sank to the floor. My whole body shook as if I had been ripped open from the inside. Betrayal from a spouse is one thing, but betrayal from within your own family blood that should have protected you, that wound, is something words cannot contain. I pressed my fists against my chest, as though I could hold myself together by force alone. For days after, I lived in a haze. I replayed every memory, every moment of laughter, every tender word, searching for the lies I had missed. The agony wasn't just in the act itself, but in realizing how long I had been blind. My trust had been a weapon turned against me. My kindness had been the soil where their deception thrived. But grief slowly hardened into rage, and rage sharpened into resolve. I had fought enemies I could see, men who carried guns and wore uniforms. But this betrayal was an enemy within my own home, and if war was what they wanted, war was what they would get. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would not crumble. Instead, I would use the discipline drilled into me, the strategy that had kept me alive on foreign soil, to reclaim my dignity. They had underestimated me, forgotten that soldiers are trained not just to fight but to win. The days that followed felt like walking through ash after a fire, charred gray and suffocating. My phone buzzed constantly with Daniel's calls and messages, each one a pathetic mix of apologies, excuses, and manipulations. It was a mistake, Sarah. I wasn't thinking. You know I still love you. Don't throw everything away over one bad choice. But I knew better. Cheating wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. And the fact that it wasn't just anyone but my brother-in-law made it a betrayal with layers of venom I could hardly untangle. I ignored him. I ignored all of them. Instead, I turned inward. I started gathering my strength the way I had before a mission. In the military, preparation was survival. You assessed terrain, studied your enemy, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. I realized I needed to treat this betrayal the same way. First, I began securing myself financially. Daniel and I had shared accounts, but most of the savings came from my veteran's pension and the investments I'd made before we married. Quietly, I shifted money into an account with only my name attached. I met with a lawyer telling him everything. He listened, nodded, and began drawing up the paperwork. Divorce was inevitable. But I wanted more than just separation, I wanted justice. Then I started watching. My brother-in-law Eric had a reputation even before all of this, reckless with money, constantly chasing schemes, always leaning on family when he failed. He had borrowed from Daniel more than once. Now I realized why they were so close, closer than they should have been. The lawyer suggested I gather evidence, so I did. Every text message, every email, every transfer of funds, I documented it all. But there was another side to this, the emotional side. My parents were gone, and my only sibling, Mark, was married to Eric's sister. That meant if I exposed what happened, it wouldn't just tear apart my marriage, it would tear apart my extended family too. I wrestled with guilt in the dead of night, asking myself whether silence would be kinder. But every time I remembered Daniel's voice whispering in the dark to Eric, every time I pictured their bodies tangled on my sheets, I felt the answer clawing at me. No more silence. No more lies. The breaking point came when Daniel showed up at my door unannounced. I hadn't seen him in weeks, and when I opened the door, his face was gaunt, his eyes wild. He tried to push past me, but I blocked him. "Please, Sarah," he begged. "Don't ruin us. Don't ruin me." His voice cracked in a way that might have moved me once. Not anymore. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You already ruined everything. Now I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." I closed the door in his face and slid the deadbolt shut. My hands shook, but not from weakness, from power. For once I wasn't the one on my knees. The following week I made my move. With my lawyer's help, I filed for divorce citing infidelity and presenting the evidence I had gathered. I knew Daniel's reputation would take a hit, but I wasn't finished yet. There were rumors about shady deals Daniel had made through his company with Eric as the middleman. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper. What he uncovered made my blood run cold. Daniel and Eric had funneled money through shell accounts covering gambling debts and funding trips they claimed were business expenses. My money, my pension, my sacrifices. They had burned it all in their fire of deceit. Rage turned into something sharper: strategy. If they thought they could destroy me quietly, I would destroy them loudly. The investigator's report landed in my hands like a weapon. I sent it directly to Daniel's board of directors, his investors, even his parents. I didn't attach a note. I didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than any accusation. The fallout was immediate. Daniel's company froze his accounts pending review. Eric was suddenly blacklisted from the small circles of business he still had left. And me, I stood in the center of the storm, with my head high, not as a broken wife, but as a soldier reclaiming her battlefield. But still there were nights when the loneliness hit hard. I would sit in the quiet of my empty house staring at old wedding photos, wondering how it had come to this. I had loved Daniel with every fiber of my being. I had believed in him, trusted him, and yet he had chosen betrayal. The ache was real, but beneath it was something stronger, a sense of freedom. I wasn't bound by lies anymore. I was free to rebuild on my terms. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase. The storm truly broke when Daniel's parents called me. His mother's voice shook on the phone, trembling between disbelief and shame. "Sarah," she whispered, "is it true? Did he really? With Eric? And the money? I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly, my knuckles ached. "It's all true," I said softly. I didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence is there. I couldn't stay silent anymore. There was silence on the other end and the faint sound of her crying. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my dignity, I was forcing everyone else to see the truth they had been too blind or too comfortable to acknowledge. The news spread quickly. Daniel's company ousted him from his leadership role, pending a full investigation. Eric disappeared from social gatherings, his once loud bravado replaced with a cowardly silence. And me, I became the unspoken storm at the center of it all, the woman who had detonated the bomb they thought I'd never dare to touch. But revenge, I learned, is never clean. With every victory came waves of grief. Some nights I sat on the floor of my empty bedroom, clutching a pillow, aching for the man I thought Daniel was. Not the liar, not the cheater, but the man who had once held me through panic attacks, the man who had promised forever under a sky of fireworks. I mourned him as if he had died, even though he still walked the earth. Betrayal is a kind of death, the death of trust, of innocence, of the version of your life you thought was real. Yet even in my grief, I refused to falter. I poured my energy into rebuilding the life they had tried to destroy. I found work at a local nonprofit supporting veterans, pouring my pain into purpose. I reconnected with old friends I had pushed away during my marriage. Slowly, piece by piece, I stitched myself back together, not into the woman I had been, but into someone harder, sharper, more resilient, more. Then came the day I ran into Eric. It was at a grocery store of all places. I was reaching for a bag of apples when I heard his voice behind me, low and bitter. "You ruined me, Sarah." I turned, meeting his bloodshot eyes. He looked smaller somehow, his once polished swagger replaced with desperation. "No, Eric," I said coldly. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped letting you use me as your shield." His face twisted, but he had no words. He turned and walked away, and I stood there unshaken. Daniel's downfall was slower, more public. Photos of him leaving courtrooms splashed across local papers. Investors sued business partners, severed ties. He tried to call me again this time, not to apologize, but to accuse. "You wanted to destroy me?" His voicemail spat, "and you succeeded. I hope you're proud." I deleted it without hesitation. Pride wasn't the word for what I felt. It was vindication, it was survival. Still, the hardest confrontation came not from them, but from within my own family. My brother Mark called me late one night. His voice was tight, strained. "Sarah, this thing with Eric, it's tearing the family apart. His sister, my wife, she doesn't know how to face it. The kids are asking questions. Was it worth it? Exposing it all like this?" I swallowed hard, tears burning my eyes. Mark, it was already tearing us apart. I didn't break this family. They did. I just refused to cover the cracks with lies. There was silence, then a quiet sigh. "I know," he admitted. "I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much." But truth always hurts. That's why so many people run from it. As the months passed, the dust began to settle. Divorce proceedings moved forward. My lawyer, sharp and relentless, ensured I kept what was rightfully mine. The judge, after seeing the evidence of financial misconduct, ruled heavily in my favor. I walked out of that courtroom not just free, but with the resources to start fresh. On the anniversary of the day I caught them, I lit a candle in my living room. Not for mourning, but for closure. I stood there in the flickering light and whispered, "I survived you." It was the most honest prayer I had ever spoken. And deep in my chest, where the pain once lived, there was space now, space for hope, for peace, for whatever life was waiting to unfold. The final chapter of this story wasn't about Daniel or Eric. It was about me, about reclaiming the life they had tried to crush, about finding myself beyond the wreckage. I remember the first morning I woke up after the divorce was finalized. The papers lay on the table, signed and sealed, and for the first time in years, the air in my house felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if I had exorcised a poison that had lingered too long. I made myself coffee, sat on the porch, and listened to the quiet. No shouting, no manipulation, no gnawing fear of what lie I might stumble upon next. just peace. It was foreign and it was beautiful. People around town whispered. Some pitied me, some admired me, others didn't know what to think. I learned not to care. I had spent too long living for the approval of others, hiding my pain behind a mask of strength. Now I embraced the rawness of my scars. When neighbors asked how I was doing, I answered honestly, healing. That one word was enough. Daniel, from what I heard, spiraled further. The company he once flaunted as his empire was no longer his. He fought lawsuits, battled creditors, and tried desperately to cling to an image that had already shattered. Eric wasn't doing any better. His debts mounted, his reputation ruined. Together they had once thought themselves untouchable. Now they were shadows of the men they pretended to be. But my story wasn't about their downfall. It was about my rise. I found strength in helping others. At the nonprofit, I met veterans carrying their own burdens of betrayal and trauma. For the first time, I could turn my pain into something meaningful, into empathy that could heal others. Every time I listened to someone else's story of survival, I felt less alone in my own. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Chloe, a fellow veteran and volunteer, asked me out for coffee. She was kind, with eyes that had seen too much but still carried light. I hesitated. How could I trust again? How could I open my heart when it had been shattered so brutally? But over cups of bitter coffee and quiet laughter, I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't mean love is impossible. It just means love must be rebuilt on honesty, on respect, on lessons learned the hardest way possible. Months passed and my heart began to heal, not because someone else fixed it, but because I finally allowed myself to believe I was worth more than betrayal. I was not defined by Daniel's lies or Eric's cruelty. I was defined by my refusal to stay broken. Sometimes late at night, the memories still sting. I see Daniel's eyes widening in shock. Eric's smirk of arrogance, the hollow echo of my bedroom door slamming. But those images no longer own me. They are scars, not open wounds. And scars are proof that healing is possible. So if you've listened to my story, if you've felt even a flicker of my pain in your own life, I want you to hear this. You are stronger than betrayal. You are more than the lies told about you. You can rise from the ashes of what they tried to burn down. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But survival is possible, and beyond survival, joy waits too. Thank you for being here, for listening, for sharing this journey with me. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment with your own story of resilience. Let's remind each other that no betrayal is stronger than the will to rise again. Because in the end, betrayal may break your heart, but it can never break your spirit unless you let it.